Good morning. So I'm using for the first time this dress that I got on sale. And it is long. It is a little different from what I used to wear, but it is very comfortable. And that's kind of like all I want for my clothes. But yeah, so it's been a little while since I recorded a video. I think it's been like a week. And things have been mostly, great. Things are just really working out. Although I will say that the past couple of days, like I feel my concentration is kind of, it's getting worse. And I'm struggling more to write my novel because that's pretty much what I've been focusing on. Every spare moment that I have, every, window of time, I am, writing, and I'm very excited about it. And I'm also very excited about like the final product, what it's going to be like. I feel like I have been able to develop my characters, develop like the scenario. Because sometimes like when I'm writing, I feel like, okay, I don't know where I'm going with this. I know what I'm trying to accomplish, but I don't know how I'm gonna get there. So it's good for me to get to this point where I'm like, oh, I see where things are going, and I think but yeah, so basically, what I want to say is that writing has been good, and for example, we're going to my aunt's place, and I'm taking my laptop with me because I'll be writing. I did the same thing Saturday. It's currently a holiday. It's kind of out. Kind of out is today Tuesday, but then usually Mondays you don't work or have school or anything, and then you have the weekend. So it's like this very long celebration, and honestly, I don't care because a lot of people really dislike it. And I understand like it kind of like makes traffic worse and it's kind of like hard for you to go places. But ultimately, I'm like, you know what? I don't care. I don't think it's profane. I don't think I have no issues with it. And I never, like you have this expression that you're jumping kind of about like I never done that, and this is pretty much something I realized, this year because my brother he had like a day where he kind of was. So I was like, okay, he's done this. He's a decade younger than me, and I never did it. But to be fair, like I don't really like crowds, so it's not really something that I would be inclined to do. But there are certain aspects of it that like I think I could incorporate into like my routine, into like whatever it is that I'm doing. Do a little drinking. I know I can drink, but just a little. It wouldn't be bad. But yeah, but it is kind of where we are at, today. But yeah, so about the future, my class starts next month, so it's going to be it's going to be a change in my routine. So I'm trying to get like as much done as I possibly can, like regarding like my novel right now, before class starts again. And because also like I want to really dedicate myself to what I will be studying. I've been struggling with this for the past 5 years, so it is something that I'm kind of like looking forward to, like resuming my status as a top student. But yeah, so basically, something happened yesterday. I went to my friend's place and we were, playing games. It was, more games. But there was also video games. And we ended up having, the conversation went to a little more personal topic. And the whole, essay situation that I had when I was 13, I struggle a lot to say the words, you know, and I was able to say them yesterday. So I was like, okay, that's growth. I don't know, like it's just for words, for letters, but I don't know. I struggle to just say it. Like I was and yesterday, I was able to say it. So I was like, okay, I'm healing, I'm doing better, and that's all that you can hope for sometimes. Like that you heal, and that things they're not as painful as they used to be. But yeah, but in terms of like my personal development, I think that this past couple of days where I've been a little bit more distracted, I've been fantasizing more because like the beginning of like last week, I was all about my novel, so I wasn't really fantasizing about anything in my life. It was just about like the story. I was kind of like thinking about like what's going to happen next, what can I do, and all that. So it was pretty good. As I said, like, but I still will say that something positive is that even though when I get distracted, I have been able to find my way back. Yesterday was a bad example, but like yesterday I was out for most of the day, so I only had some time to write like towards like the end of the afternoon, like after we came back. So it's okay. It was like a couple hours that I wasn't really able to produce as much as I wanted, but that doesn't change the fact that I've been kind of like on a roll, and that's kind of like what I want. And it's interesting because like I think the more involved I get in my writing, the more grounded I get because suddenly I'm thinking about my life in terms of like my writing. I'm thinking about I want to finish this novel and the next one I want to have this quartet completed, and then I'm gonna write the other series and that type of thing. And it's very exciting, for me to kind of like be excited about like my life and know about what could be, or what wasn't, And it's interesting because I'm kind of like open to some things, but like I don't think I'm actively pursuing them, even though I might actively want them to happen. But when I have my writing, like that is kind of like my number one priority, and it feels good to kind of like have something like that in your life, something that gets you going, something that makes things worth it. So I'm very excited about that. But in other news, as I said, like my internal my personal development, I'm doing like the gratitude thing, like I'm kind of like displaying my gratitude. I'm grateful for things, and I continue to do that, and I think it's been really good for me, so I'm happy about that. And I think it's kind of like changed my outlook on life, so like that is pretty good. I'm happy, and it's also like a way for me to counter anxiety, and like the negative thoughts that are coming. Because, for example, as I mentioned this before, it's election year this year, and historically, elections have made me very tense. Like they made me very like anxious and frustrated. So I'm at a place right now. I'm like, what? I'm not going to pay attention. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna do my part. I'm gonna vote, and then I don't want to suffer in anticipation. Basically, is what I'm trying to say. And whatever happens, it happens, and that's that. Like it doesn't mean that like I will be directly harmed, because that's usually like the concern. Like you and people like you, like what's going to happen, like what's going to occur, and basically it's not it's kind of like hard to put these things away, like in your mind, but it's doable. And as I said, like writing helps a lot because I'm putting out my thoughts and my feelings out there, and it's interesting because it is fantasy, so like it's not but like it has its own like world and like their own government and systems and all that, so I am allowed to kind of like like put out there like the things that make me anxious, the things that are kind of like getting in the way. But yeah, so gratitude, gratefulness, that's been working out well. I've been doing a lot of meditation, of mindfulness meditation. When I'm going to bed, that's usually what I'm doing. I put on video that is like 10-30 minutes, and I kind of like I haven't really gotten to a point where like I'm fully present all the time, because sometimes my thoughts, they kind of like wander. But what I have been doing, what has been happening, like that is like I'm really happy about that, because like I think that I'm going to bed more relaxed. Because the thing about music that I have been noticing is that I think what I've been wanting to hear, like listen to, is being very agitated, very kind of like fast paced, and because that's what I usually like to listen to. But it's not great for when you're going to bed. Like it's not great, like it doesn't really stimulate calming thoughts. Oh yeah, also my Spotify, I'm like back on the free version because like my 4-year student plan like is over. So like now I'm like at the free version. I've been considering going to like Apple Music, because then I could be 4 years there, but I'm like, I'm gonna stay here for a while. Let's see where this goes, particularly because like I haven't really been listening to a lot of music, at least not like the music that I usually listen to. Something I've been listening to a lot is just like the soundtrack, songs from like this fantasy world. So for example, there's like this lullaby in Narnia, the first Narnia movie, and I really like that. So there was like a certain point where I was writing, where I was like, okay, that is the melody I was trying to describe, because that's kind of like what I wanted to be playing, and I was listening to it. So I started listening to it, and then like there's so many different renditions of like the song with like so many different instruments. So like I was basically kind of like on a loop listening to that, and that is something that is calming. So maybe I should, if I'm gonna listen to anything, it should be that, when I go to bed. And then like there's some like Lord of the Rings songs that so I've been very much like in that vibe. And so it's like, so I'm kind of like listening to that, but I'm listening like on YouTube, and so yeah, so like I haven't really been going to the yeah. But like as I said, like the main thing in my life right now is writing, and I'm very happy about that. Yesterday was very worrisome for me because, as I said, I couldn't really concentrate. I was kind of like lost in thoughts and lost like in my fantasies, and that was frustrating. But today is a new day, and I'm going to try to do better. But in general, like as I said, like I'm practicing gratefulness, and I think that's had an effect. I'm practicing mindfulness, and that's also had an effect. And I think that these things have been helping me relax. Like I'm not as tense as I mentioned, and I'm just, kind of just vibing sometimes. Like I'm just like doing my thing, and I'm projecting, as I said, like all my feelings into like what I'm writing, and I'm really happy with the results. I think that like this third novel is going to really elevate the previous ones, and also like this world, because I think we're seeing more complexity and more of the things that yeah, like I think we're seeing more of the world and how things work in a way I haven't really seen before, because we're mostly following, a character that is new to this, to the whole thing. But yeah, but I'm happy that things are connecting. Like that is the best feeling, when things connect. Like sometimes, and I feel like you just have to trust the process. I think like that's the lesson, because if you keep going, things are going to, I mean, at least that's my experience, like things end up connecting in the most unexpected ways. And I have my notes, and they've been very helpful, like notes of like things that I want to explore in this book based on like things that have been established in the previous ones. And I think that at least really helps me, because like if I'm kind of like unsure where I'm going, I can kind of like bring one of those elements back. And naturally, like not everything works every time, but like the success rate has been very high. But yeah, so gratitude, mindfulness, and acceptance. I think that the whole thing of like me being able to say the word, although I would say like it's kind of like weird, because I was able to say yes to it, maybe because I was like in a kind of like somewhat comfortable context with like people, somewhat close to. But like right now saying this here, I still feel self-conscious. Not self-conscious, I don't know if that's the word, but like I feel like admitting it, there's a level of vulnerability that you have to kind of like accept, and you have to accept, because like that version of myself is different from the version I'm trying to project into the world. And I want to think of myself as a strong person, as somebody who can defend herself, somebody who can like take care of things, that is not going to be exposed. So like at the minute, like that situation, it kind of like contradicts this in a certain way. Not really, because you could argue that like I became all those things because of like that experience, but it's still like it is kind of it's a dicey topic basically for me. But it was good that I was able to kind of like say that out loud, in any context. That shows growth. But yeah, but acceptance is, I know I've been talking a lot about acceptance lately, but because it is something that's very necessary, something that I really need to work on, because there's still like so many little things that here and there that like I'm still struggling to kind of like accept. And it is it's going to be a long process. It's been a long process, and it's going to be a long process, because this is not really something that ends, because you're going to face new situations, new circumstances, and that leads to like more things for you to kind of like accept about yourself. And also you change as a person, so you have to accept like these new versions of yourself, and like how yeah, like that is kind of like challenging. So I've been kind of like thinking about like who I can be as a person. I'm still doing like that thing where I'm like trying to find characteristics, personality traits that I have to define myself, outside of like work and school. And I think that, I kind of like, I thought about one, the other day, but right now I forget what it was. But it's been like a kind of like a almost fun exercise, because it involves me kind of like looking at myself, and as I said, the whole thing of acceptance, because it is kind of, because I'm trying to be honest, I'm trying to just really I want to legitimately come up with like kind of like a spreadsheet, you could say, of things that I can say about myself, because I think that at the end of the day, like that is going to be very helpful for me moving forward, because that's kind of like part of me defining my identity, and like the things that I value, the things that are important to me. And it's interesting, because I think yesterday I was just thinking to myself, and I kind of like, I realized I was thinking about like political realities, and like where I stand on them, and like what I think. And I came to the conclusion that some like certain individuals, like I will never really be able to support them, specifically not necessarily because of like their policies, but because of all the things they had said. And I think that I didn't want to kind of like accept this at first, because I was like, oh, that's kind of like petty or whatever, like there should be kind of like a logical explanation for that. And there is, like there's like like there's no way I would support them, politically speaking, because like we have different ideas, we kind of like are not aligned. But it is something for me to kind of like consider that ultimately, like even if they had a completely different view of things, even if they changed their ways, I still will not support them, because some of the things that have been said by these figures, and I think it's valid. Like, it's totally fine that this is how I stand, because ultimately, because I feel like I didn't want to accept this, because I wanted people to kind of like think more about policies and all that, when it came to kind of like them accepting that, them choosing who's going to represent them. But a lot of times people, they kind of like, they linger on petty shit. They linger on like things that don't have to do. I mean, you could argue that like everything has to do, because like if you say something, you do something, like it kind of like speaks of like your kind of like values. So there's that reality. But it was something that I kind of like, as I said, like there are some barriers. Oi. So I think I had finally accepted that people are going to make choices sometimes based on pettiness, and I also accepted that like sometimes I make choices based on pettiness, and I don't deny that this pettiness like in other areas of my life. But I think that when it came to politics, I wanted to see myself as somebody who was kind of like unbiased in a certain way, that somebody who was speaking picking politicians and people to vote for based on like what they were kind of like defending, what they wanted to do. But I don't know, I think that part of it's just like me struggling to accept the world, because ultimately people can make whatever choices they want. They can kind of like really call up to like a lot of like different things, and it doesn't really have to be reasonable. It doesn't have to be kind of like a rational decision. It can just be something kind of like out of emotion. And I think that's been very liberating for me, because I think I'm allowing myself to kind of like have more emotional responses to things. It's not that I wasn't having them before, but I was kind of like suppressing them, and that doesn't really lead to anything. Like, it doesn't help. But it was something that was kind of like occurring, and I basically I had to face. I had to kind of I had to accept. So accepting this in myself, but also in the world. And I think that like life is going to be easier when I accept this. That people kind of like are very emotional in their choices, and that sometimes like they're not really being reasonable, because ultimately like you have a right to not be reasonable. Like, you have a right to kind of like act like however you want. Like, that is just life. And as I said, like, it's liberating for me to just see this in other people, because then I can see this in myself. I can I can kind of like be because the thing is, ultimately, like, of course I don't want to have emotional responses to things, but for me to get to that point, I have to first accept that I do. So when I kind of like just allow myself to be without kind of like pressure, like without any kind of like agenda, any like yeah, like any expectations, I kind of like, I get closer to who I am. And as I said, like, I'm trying to define myself, and then kind of like there's definitely a connection there, or like me accepting because ultimately like I am human. And even like people who really disagree with, people who are kind of like yelling out there in your face things that are very harmful to you, like you're kind of like more similar than otherwise. So I think that I try to create some distance between myself and the rest of the world, but that wasn't really helpful, because as I said, like, I was kind of like, I ended up pressuring myself to kind of like behave in a certain way, but I wasn't really properly processing the things I was feeling. So it led to some to disconnect between like my thoughts and my actions, and also led to kind of like, as I said, I was suppressing certain thoughts, but like you can't do that. So like they were kind of like pouring out of me, and they were leading to like anger and sadness and all that. And as I said, like, I have to process things better. So yeah, so that's been kind of like the development that's been happening. I've been accepting myself more by accepting other people and their limitations. And okay, I think we're leaving. So anyways, bye.